大家好，这里是第5届国际公共艺术奖拉丁美洲板块的线上论坛，我是孙婷。请允许我代表主办方介绍一下参与本次论坛的与会嘉宾。首先是本地区的线上主持人，哥伦比亚策展人、社会活动家和文化制作人伊丽莎白·沃勒特，她是当代艺术平台的联合创始人，也是2013年奥特拉双年展的艺术总监。接下来是拉丁美洲的代表案例。波托西电影院的作者扩展建筑团队，该团队由建筑师、艺术家和城市活动家构成，总部设于哥伦比亚的波哥大市。该团队成员包括安娜·洛佩斯·奥尔特加、哈罗德·圭亚克斯等等。第3位嘉宾是波托西电影院的研究员阿德里亚娜·里奥斯·莫萨利，他是皮索阿尔托策展实践的总监，哥伦比亚安第奥基亚博物馆的助理策展人。此外，我们还邀请了来自墨西哥城的策展人马格诺利亚·贾扎作为本场的特邀专家。他是2016年迪拜摄影展墨西哥馆的策展人，以及2014年第16届墨西哥城影像中心摄影双年展的策展人之一。让我们一起欢迎各位到场的各位专家。下面有请伊丽莎白·沃勒特主持今天的对话。
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the Institute of Public Art for the invitation. And thank you, Santin, for the introduction and presentation of the panelists in the dialogue and discussion about Potosine, the winner for the Latin American Regional Award of Excellence. My name is Elisabeth Vollert. I'm part of the jury member. And we will begin the dialogue with Adriana Rios, which is the researcher who submitted the case study. Adriana, please share with us the key aspects of the project of Potosine you considered essential as a case study of public arts.
Well, thank you, Elisabeth, and everybody in China. My name is Adriana Rios. I am the curator. I'm a curator from Colombia and the nominator of this project that was awarded for the Latin American region. And I would like, as Elisabeth said, to highlight some of the aspects that make this project relevant. We all know that there are very immense differences between what is understood as public art around the world, ranging from landscape design, monuments, public sculptures, performances, festivals, and community-based projects, among other forms. In this case, Potosine is a community-based, artist-run architectural project that is located in Syrah Bolivar neighborhood at the urban and rural border of Bogota, Colombia, and a self-built and self-managed cinema. On the other hand, expanded architecture is the collective responsible for the project, and it is made out of artists, architects, and activists who work in processes of self-construction of the physical and social spaces in peripheral areas of the cities. Their way of approaching public and common spaces is through different agents, public officials and institutions, private companies, communities, activists in general, associations, academic and cultural institutions, etc., facilitating the dialogue between them and working shoulder to shoulder to achieve a common goal. Their work is focused on civil rights, and they question the hierarchical tactics of urbanism. The development processes and the operational model were participative and included several cultural and social agents from the community. In general terms, self-construction projects in a community always bring challenges, including being realistic about the goals to achieve and at the same time to start with visible things so the community stays motivated. It is important to always think of the practical, including not needing a lot of technical equipment so they can have the help of the most people possible. Expanded Architecture Collective develops projects centered around supporting neighborhood and community processes that take charge of social and cultural management of their own historically marginalized territories. Anna and Viviana from the collective will now explain the context of the project and its creative process. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. So we'll continue this dialogue with Ana Lopez Ortego, which is member of the collective Arquitectura Expandida, who will present the project, the location, and the collaborative and artistic process that has taken place in the construction of Potosine. Please, Ana.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Adriana. We would like to begin by sharing the screen and talking about the context. Colombia is a country plagued by the typical problems of Latin American countries, so strong social inequality, human poverty, and planned megacities with a strong wave of rural urban displacement, spatial segregation, environmental segregation, racism, classism, and crime. In addition, Colombia has been immersed in an armed conflict for more than half a century, so violence, displacement, and state abandonment are some of the main characteristics of large cities such as Bogota. Syrah Bolivar is a peripheral district of Bogota with about 1 million of inhabitants, built during the last decades of the 20th century by various waves of population displaced by the armed conflict. For decades, in this district was one of the more neglected in the country, and the only public space, such as educational and sport facilities, were the ones that had been built and managed by the neighborhoods themselves. The very committed community has responded to the blind eye and lack of attention from the government with some self-made collective spaces in order to resolve this lack, but it is also the possibility to recognize themselves as active actors in a social and physical construction of their own territory through cultural and popular education. This is the case of several grassroots associations located in Potosí, a neighborhood in Syrah Bolivar, in which the community is articulated with Cerros del Sur Community College, Ojo al Sancocho Community Film School, the network of community gardens, and other local collectives that work around social and spatial justice. This is the frame. In this frame, the Potocinema is a collective prototype for the right to the city. This is a physical self-construction prototype of a bamboo and polycarbonate cinema in a landscape of precarious brick housing without common and cultural spaces. So in that landscape, the Potocinema is also a symbolic prototype. We use sample materials, but in a sophisticated way. It is transparent in a literal, but also in a conceptual way. At night, it is like a beacon on fire, and that gives the architecture a high symbolic content. And that is important because we should all have the right to a beautiful city and context. And because to be seen and recognized is a citizenship condition. But it is also a social prototype. We test different ways to organize ourselves in order to create and manage our spaces. How can we agree to work for 8 months on a common goal? How do we organize ourselves to integrate such diverse actors, adult, children, young, community, grassroots, external collaborators, and so on? And how we organize ourselves for the maintenance and shared use of the space that today takes 5 years. How does the Potocinema dialogue with people who take decisions in the city in a more equilibrated way? In brief, the Potosine and our practice is a strategy to balance power forces in the policy of the city and for the right to the city. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. And I would like to welcome and to continue with the invited experts from Mexico, Magnolia de la Garza. Please, if you could share with us the view, your view of Potosine as a public arts project in the context of Latin America.
Thank you, Elisabeth, and thank you, Institute of Public Art, for this invitation. And thank you, Arquitectura Expandida, for sharing this amazing project. I should say that when I start to read about it, I was like amazed. I'm very happy that these kind of projects can have success in a community, especially in a context like the Latin America, when these kind of communities are like the result of the violence. In the context of Colombia, the violence of the war that was living in Colombia for many decades now. It can be said the same in Guatemala, but also we can find these kind of communities in Mexico. In Mexico City, especially when you have these very large neighborhoods that were created in the last 40, 30 years, and they don't have infrastructure. They are like self-constructed, self-designed. And I think that one thing that it's important in this project is that it shows how important is to have cultural spaces in those areas. Normally, when we think about this kind of communities for projects from NGOs or from the government itself or their own demands at the beginning, they are like fighting for the access to water, electricity, maybe schools or hospitals. But normally we tend just to forget that we need these kind of spaces where people can just go and be there together, just to talk about their problems, just to share moments. We tend to imagine like culture like as a luxury item, and it's not. I think that culture it's inherent to every culture. It's part of our ADN. It's part of what makes us like humans. And I think that this project just show it that it's like these communities needs that spaces. It's like not just to go there and go to the movies. What other thing that I found interesting in the project is that it's a cinema that is showing like the films that the community is producing through this school that is working there for like 6 or 10 years now. And I think it's also that important to notice that this community just realized that they need these spaces. They need to share their creations with the rest of the people, the neighbors. And this is space also for loving, of sharing, or like to love together, or to cry together, or to see their own problems. That nobody from the outside of the community is telling them how to do these things, you know. It's not like they are showing like films from Hollywood or like wherever. I think it's important that they represent themselves in this project. It's, as Adriana mentioned, it's a self-constructed self-management, but I think it's also interesting that they are showing what they want to show, and they want to represent themselves. And I think that it's very important, and a key of the project and the success of the project here is that it's nothing that it came from the outside. It's nothing that it came from the government or like a NGO that tells them what to do or what represents themselves or what to feel or what they need. It's like it's something that it was born from their hearts, I hope, and I imagine. And I think that's important. And in the context of Latin America, it's not like a small thing that those communities need those spaces, and culture should be watching as an important part of our lives. And I think it's what I wanted to point.
Thank you very much. I think you touched upon several very interesting points of this site-specific project, yeah, where you, as you mentioned, that element of independence, that element of self-appropriation. And in regards to understand more what happens in that use of this space, this community cinema of Potosine, I would like to also invite Viviana Paraday, which is also a member of the collective Arquitectura Expandida. if you could also share with us more about that use, about that relation of the space with the citizenship, with the public neighborhood, with the public and the neighborhood. What has been that impact and that use of the space?
Well, as Anna says, and Magnolia also point, it is, we were working with, in one hand, with a communitarian school, a school that had like popular education and that understand the importance of the school, like in the way to build together like the territory, but also with this communitarian school of cinema that have been already working for about 10 to 16 years in the territory. So when this, like Anna said, the lighthouse or this milestone appear, which is the Poto Cinema, the relation with the context and with the neighborhoods have been already built. So it was really organic to like the appropriation, because it was also at 8 months of building together every weekend. Like it was not like hiring people to build something. It's about building together and being seen as the I don't know, like the decisional, yeah, like we all together made the decision to build and to go every weekend and to being seen as the actors of dignification of a cultural space. So since it was open, that was in October of 2016, every time that the Poto Cinema opens the door, it's like full, like sold out. Even if they don't sell any tickets, it's already full of people like enjoying, like almost always also, sorry, building the possibility of show what they want to see and how they want to be seen. So it is really interesting what have been happening in there.
No, thank you, Viviana. It's yeah, it's very let's say important to see how this project has had an impact not only in the urban setting, in the urban space, but actually also within the community and within, let's say, instigating creative processes through the audiovisual production. And this, as Magnolia also has pointed out, in a very independent way. And I think when there's a self appropriation and community appropriation, it becomes really like a space that not only becomes a common center, but also becomes a reference. Yeah. And I would also now in a more open dialogue with all of you also speak about this art-led urbanism. Yeah, let's say, I would say also like the evolution of art in public space. Yeah, what the public art today. Yeah, and how Potosine could somehow also be this model for among other projects around the world, but also in this context of Latin America, the nature of public space. Magnolia and Adriana, and then Arquitectura Expandida, I would like to touch upon this aspect.
I will want to add something that for your question, and it's something that they just mentioned, that it's this idea of building together. And I think that this evolution of art in the public space is related with that concept. We just can go to the community and just put like a monument or sculpture, doing a performance, if we are not related with them, if they are not part of the whole process since the beginning. And this idea of build together, I think it's part of our culture, not just in Colombia, but I can see it in Mexico or in Guatemala, or even in some parts in Argentina. And I just hear recently this, someone remember this tradition of these neighborhoods, that when somebody is going to get married, The whole community goes during the weekend, they have beer, they prepare some food, and they start to build the room for the couple together as a part of this kind of ritual of the party. And I think that this idea is just stays or like permeates this idea of this Potosinem. And I think that's a very important aspect to consider, because I'm part of a project of a public park in the northwest of Mexico. It's a government and from a private sector project. It's 25 years in the context of a very violent city that was very touched by the narco in the last couple of years. And it's an amazing project. I think that we did a lot of things, but I think that's a thing that is not clear yet there. It's that how the community can transform the space. And I think with this art in a public space, we just don't need like artists or our cultural agents to propose a project. I think it's sometimes at least in the context of Mexico, these projects looks like aliens in the communities. We arrive, we just build a park, or we just build like a museum in these areas. But if the community is not taking part in the process, it doesn't work. It's like they were going to be abandoned for the next administration. They don't care because it's something that the government did for them or an NGO did for them. And I think that this evolution, and just to make a difference through art, because one thing that it's important also is that art can change lives. I think that these projects just like they're showing some alternatives. Some of the young population of these areas just know the violence. And I think that in Colombia is more like in Mexico, and it's happening in some other places in Latin America, that the crime and the violence is like the alternative for most of these kids that are abandoned the schools. They don't have opportunities. So art just became like an alternative to that life. I can imagine that this audiovisual school just keep them outside of the streets. They give us like a proposal of their, for the spare time, or like an alternative. And so I think it's very important just to consider that. It's not something that just going to show your project or just going to do something for the community. You need to think that you are changing lives through art and through these kind of spaces. Otherwise, the project doesn't make sense. I mean, it's beautiful just to have a performance, but if it's not touching something in the long term or in a medium term, I don't know how it can work. Or if it's like, it's nice just to have like this theater plays on the streets, but if the community is not involved, it's something that is for a moment, it's a passenger. So I think it's why a project like this, I think it's very important, and it's settling like goals for future projects.
Thank you, Magnolia. I agree with your perspective. Adriana, would you like to also comment on this part of this art-led urbanism and how, as Magnolia also pointed out, this impact on the city and on the concept of public arts?
Yes, absolutely. But even more than that, I just wanted to point out one thing that that is very particular to this collective, or maybe it happens everywhere, I don't know. But it's like communities are already paying attention to what Arquitectura Expandida is doing. So they meet up with them in other locations and venues, and they approach them and say and tell them all the time, hey, we want to collaborate with you. Can you come to our neighborhood and help us do this we've been dreaming about for so long? And this is like it's like a long-term dialogue with many communities, or like cultural agent, you know, in this case, the cinema guys from Ojos Sancocho, and it happens everywhere. So it's something that it's always like there, like waiting to happen, you know. It might not happen ever, but they're always in constant dialogue with them. And that is kind of like a seed for a change, for a future infrastructure that also, or maybe that kind of challenges this idea of community-based urbanism. So I wanted to mention that because I think it's very particular and very interesting.
Thank you, Adriana. Indeed, it's very interesting how you also this notion of impact, no? That it's not only from the community, but actually the neighborhood, and then, as you're pointing out, even as a city reference with other neighborhoods. And Ana and Viviana, would you like to also give us your perspective on this?
Yes, we think the start point is very important in that project. Who invites who to participate? And for example, in that project, it was a diagnosis from the community, from Ojo Sancocho School, and they invite us to collaborate with them. So that is the first point that is very important. And it is very important to think that the art is an alternative. It's an important alternative in that context, but not only as consumers of art, but also as producers. So in the school filmmakers community, they are showing another face of their territory. And the photo cinema is also the way to show another face of the territory, a stigmatized territory. So to me, that are two things very important about the start point. And after, we are going to invite another peoples to take part in that network of conspiration. And for example, in the photo cinema, it was very, very important to the connection with the Design Museum of London, because the photo cinema was built by the support of this museum in the frame of the exhibition Fear and Love, a Reaction to a Complex World. And when the curator called us, they have already understood that they should find an indirect way to finance the construction. Although if officially the Design Museum was paying for the audiovisual material for the exhibition. I would like to say that that is a type of conspiration. The business model was a conspiration. The connection with a museum was a conspiration, but the start point was in the community, in the film school maker.
Excellent. As you point out, the starting point really makes a difference. And also, thank you for explaining and describing this process, which actually was a long process, and it shows the participation on many levels. And that's also a component that makes an added component of value to this project. Let's see, I would also, you mentioned, and also for all the panelists, the concept of the right to the city, or the right to culture. And I would say also, this is quite interesting, the notion of public space in Latin America with that concept of the right to the city and the right to culture. Ana or Viviana or Magnolia, if we could open the dialogue with this.
I want to talk about the right to the city, because especially, I mean, in the context of Latin America, I think that we don't have like an urban plan for a long, long time. We are always have like these schools of urbanists that becomes like more like utopian than practical. And a lot of these cities, especially these mega cities like Sao Paulo, Bogota, Mexico City, just start to grow without a plan. It start to grow as a process of poverty or the violence in the countryside, and with no help for the government, no idea. So this idea of the right of the city is very different of what can happen in Europe or in the United States, or even in China, because there's an urban plan. It's a plan for the future. They are planning in advance. In 5 years, 10 years, this is going to happen. It's not our case. And so this right to the city is something that we are building every day now. It's these communities arrived 40 or 50 or 30 years ago in the most recent ones. And they start with the basic, a home. You have a place to live, and they realize then that they need something else, and they start demanding for water, electricity, some basic service. But I think it's interesting that they need also all these places like the schools, that the schools are in those areas are not just a place where kids go and learn something. It's also places where the community just reunite, the mothers just talk about the problems, or the kids together there. And so this right to the city is again, it's not something that comes from the government or the upper system. It's something that it's they are building. It's a very, I like this idea that Viviana just presented, who invites who to participate. And I think in these cases is very important because they are not just conspiracy, it's a conspiration among the different agents. They're basing this relation of trust with different people. And so this right to the city, so this right to the public space or to cultural infrastructure, it's something that is building together. It's not someone arrived from the academy and decide that they need that, or because it's according to some theories. It's something that is really born from the collectivity, and they are demanding those spaces. And I think it's important just to listen to them and support their needs, and not to just go there with our nice ideas from the academy and just to transfer it there. Just listen, it's important in that part of the right to the city. It's which city? The one that we are living, the one that they are living, or the one that we want to build together.
Excellent, Magnolia. We would like to continue. Ana or Adriana? Ana, sí.
Yes, we think that the right to the city have two very important sides as the female love. A very love space, a space where we take care each one to other. But that is also a space to activism, because the right to the city is an antagonist right against the accumulation of power of political and economic elites. So to us, it's very important the connection between two levels, the daily life level that is full of love and collaboration and a very, very personal relationship, but also an activism point, from an activism point of view, it's very important to ask for the right to the city, to visibilize the marginal situation, to visibilize that the state is doing nothing for a territory, to visibilize that the daily life is very complicated, it's very violent. And I really love the point of Magnolia about the culture as a basic need, because the daily life is very complex. So maybe the cultural space, the cultural social space is something very important in order to have that love approach of that project.
Thank you, Anna.
Even
Viviana.
like through self-construction to habilitate these spaces, that also habilitate this decision on the scale through the agencies to build together to decide how to build our context and the city. So for the photocine, for example, is a high symbolic element that allows like all the possibilities to navigate the cities and also to build relationships and to build networks and to be seen. And like Magnolia pointed, like it's not just the academic institution to come and say what to do or what it's need, but I don't know if I'm just trying to say that also these institutions of the different actors are needed in order to protect the process. It's not just the bottom up, but all the top down actors or the top down institutions that help us also to like shield to protect the process in a different scales, multiple scales.
Thank you, Viviana. Adriana, would you like to comment on this, or the right to the city and the right to culture?
Well, maybe just say that I think it is very important, like what they do, kind of like working with these other cultural institutions or not institutions, like community-based cultural agencies, because there is like an implied understanding of what the community needs, you know, and that there are ways to do so in that claim of the right of the city. But I wonder actually how this happened with members of the community that don't think that people either think the government should do everything and they're just trying to wait for it to happen, or the members of the community to also waiting for the private sector to invest in whatever happens there. You know, I kind of feel that they locate in this territory in between that can be very conflicted, you know, how I don't know, I would really like to know how they kind of manage these other opinions about.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you for pointing that out. In fact, yeah, there's without a doubt in any community or city process, there's always other points of view of let's say, an active participation or a passive participation or an independence or dependence. But let's see what happens in Potosí in regards to this question with Adriana, Anna and Viviana, if you could tell us more about this.
The urban context is always full of conflict, and the community is not homogeneous. It's very heterogeneous. So in the Potocinema, I think the community is very, very joined together, but usually we can find some people from the community who thinks that, for example, all the problems must be resolved by the police, for example. And that is a very vertical way to understand the cohabitation in the city. And that the culture of Latin American neighborhoods is more about organize ourselves in order to cohabitate, in order to live together. So at the end, we don't really have a response, a close response about that. The communities are very heterogeneous, but we try to show that there is another way to organize ourselves in order to cohabitate in territory. And that can be useful even if we are very different between us. So the collectivity is a very interesting tool. The collectivity, I would like to say, having a common target and placing beside the different communities, identities that could split more than join us together. I mean, political, religious, or socioeconomic identities. And that is very important in our work, to find a common target. And the common target in the photocinema is to build the photocinema. And we are very different. And we are not to be agree in all the things, but we are going to be agree about one thing. And that sense of collectivity, we think, is very important in our work.
Yes, and also the that we work with grassroots organizations that have been already working in the territory. It's not about parachuting territory, it's not parachuting art. It's just like the organic response of a whole process having development in the territory for 12 to 15 years. So in that way, it's easier just to guarantee the sustainability of the space and to somehow make this difference between the actor the territory a little bit smaller.
Thank you. And definitely just remembering the context that this is also not in the location, that it is in the periphery and who lives there, and that also makes a huge difference of what can be these rights that arise. And for these last minutes that remain, it would be wonderful, Ana and Viviana, if we could also know what has been this impact today. Let's say when it was constructed in 2016, these years, if you could tell us, and then bring us to the moment of how is Photocine being activated, or rather continues to be activated.
The numbers are amazing. A lot of people, a lot of films, and also films self-produces and community films from Colombia, from Syrah Bolivar, but also from another places in the world. So I think just the number in a quantitative, from a quantitative point of view, are amazing. But I think in a symbolic way, it was very important, for example, the international award, because people feel proud about ourselves. Because we are recognized, but because to be seen and recognized is a citizenship condition, and that is very important. And for example, last week I meet someone who works in Syrah Bolivar, but in another place of Syrah Bolivar, and he was very excited to know us because we are the people who collaborate in the photocinema, because the photocinema now is a point of reference in Syrah Bolivar. And that is something very important about autoesteem, about the way to be against the stigmatization. And I feel that is very, very important in the impact in a more qualitative way.
Yeah, and you can have if you have the process, it's not the same if you have a space, like a symbolic element in the territory that you can point and you say, like, this is my house, this is where I develop my product, this is where I show the products of the processes of these whole years. We can create in the very first year, like, because Orjuela Sancocho is also a international communitarian festival of cinema, invite and have a huge network of communitarian schools all around the world, most in Latin America. But in one point it was like, okay, let's build photocinemas all around the world, because it's the logic answer, is the next step, because we have the process and now we want to have these lighthouses all around Latin America, all around the US, all around Singapore, I don't know. and it's yeah, like when you have your house, when you have your space that to build these affections, like to build this relation, to build love, to build like also this place that of protection of our sadness or whatever. It's also really, really, I don't know, really, it has an impact, a huge impact, and the people that collaborate and that have been building not just the space, but the whole process.
Thank you so much, Anna and Viviana, for sharing the process of a very successful example of art in public space and on so many levels, as you described today, and as these perspectives of Magnolia and Adriana. It's quite motivating to know more about how this project can impact within the community, but also as viewers and also within the field of the arts. I would like to thank the participation of Magnolia and the participation of Adriana as researcher and definitely Arquitectura Expandida and its other members, because I believe Arquitectura Expandida has more members. It's always expansive, as the name implies. It's Arquitectura Expandida for giving us this opportunity to dialogue on this project, and definitely for the Institute for Public Arts. Thank you for this event and for this process that has brought us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Your discussions are very excellent. Now I want to have a short conclusion in Chinese.